Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Golden Hour, joined by Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, good to be back here with you again.
Hey, Sharif, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, Kevin, this is our last episode before we take a little summer break. And lately, a big theme has been memory for us. We've both been studying memory a lot, and it's super interesting. And I think we want to help all of our listeners to have really a summer to remember here.
Yes.
But this raises the question for me. So as we help, so I was explaining to someone some of the things that we've been talking about with memory, and then also was telling them about OptimalWork. There's someone who wasn't familiar with it, and then they asked me about the memory stuff. So is that optimal work? And I didn't really know what to say because it's not, you know, reframing mindfulness challenge, but it's very important to how to work at your best. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how the memory piece fits in with optimal work at a high level.
hmm I think memory is one of the powers of the soul, like intellect and will. So it is what then you associate it with attention, which is you're tuning in to the present moment, whole and entire. We think of mindfulness as how you exercise that. And also then with remembering things that were. So memory attends to being and non being. Just as the intellect will attend to what is true, it pays attention to what's true and what's false, the will to what's good and what's evil. Memory is what is and what is not. So it's the basis for the ability to know the truth about anything and to choose anything. You have to first be real. You have to be in the present moment fully. So insofar as optimal work helps people to thrive on challenge, those challenges, as you thrive on them, you're making them present in some way. So sometimes you can call to mind challenges from the past or challenges that might exist so that you learn how to practice them and rehearse them. But really, challenge is always in the present moment. So insofar as we help people to take this hour and to bring, challenge themselves in the best way possible in that hour, we are in some way working with memory and attention. So it's maybe not the usual way people think of, what memory does. But I think that any work people put in to memory helps them in the end to experience growth in a new way. Because we often are not working consciously on how to remember things better. And I think this is one of those areas where it's so easy to have this fixed mindset. Like we think we have a good memory or we think we have a bad memory more problematically. And people don't see that, no, this is something that can be exercised and worked on. So it seems to me, that yes, it presents to us a challenge, and there are skills that that we can use that will shape our ability to remember. So I would love to see us making more and more progress in helping people to use the full power of their memory. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, memory has this interesting place. It's not quite like reading or programming in being a technical skill where you change something outside you, but um, it's also not like an ideal necessarily like courage or prudence or fortitude, but having a good, I mean, but it's still very, it's this internal mental skill, but it's like the most fundamental one. So I don't know, is it kind of in a category by itself, or what would you group it with in terms of what are the other types of things like this ability to recall information accurately?
I think it's tied to a number of kind of ideals, I guess you could say that we uh, the it mindfulness is in some way the foundation of memory because you can't store the first act of memory as a power is to attend to the present moment. You have to fully attend to something. The second act is to then store it, and the third is to retrieve it. So people often just think of memory in terms of the retrieval, but if there's problems with retrieval, usually you have to go back to the beginning. There are problems in attending. You have to give something your entire attention to be able to fully remember it. So the more we can help people to be in their work and to be completely able to attend to the present moment, the present task, the better then they're going to be able to remember everything that comes through them at that moment. But like multitasking and rushing, those things actually hurt your ability to attend to the present moment, and they also hurt your ability to then form memory. I think also it's tied to a sense of curiosity about being in contact with what is and discovering it, investigating it, letting your mind fully get into it. It's tied very much to understanding. That if you really want to understand something, or if I should say, if you really want to be able to remember something, in some ways, you just seek to deeply understand it. And the more you attain a really solid understanding of that thing, then the easier it is for you to just, without even putting effort in, you store the memory of it. So, because when you understand something deeply, you connect it to everything else you know. And it's the connection, in fact, that gets stored. So we don't really store so much numbers or facts or words. What we do store, in fact, is connections between things. So the more deeply you understand something, then the better you can remember it. So I think this idea of a summer to remember, is a nice theme of using the summer months to build your ability to remember things. There's also a side benefit of this, which is, don't you want to remember your summer? Don't you want the summer to feel like it's a very long time? And the same things that help us in practicing memory actually will help us to lengthen the summer. And so I think that's another angle on it. I remember this piece from 10 years ago by Claudia Hammond in Wall Street Journal, where she talked about how to make summer last longer. And she has a book on time perception, which I don't know, but the piece was excellent. And if you always, let's say, went to the same beach, and you even if you went there every day, at the end of the summer when you look back, it's going to feel like one day because it's the same thing all the time. It might have been great, it might have been your favorite beach, but if it's always the same, when you look back, you won't be able to distinguish all the different days in your memory, except maybe in some kind of intellectual way, like I knew I went there, 20 times or 50 times. Just varying how you do things in the summertime. Have a completely new routine. Go different places than you normally go. Each weekend, make it be that there's some new kind of adventure where you're going somewhere new. It doesn't even matter if it's just going to a different Costco than you normally go to. I mean, like at the most basic level, you just try to vary. The summer should give us a little more freedom to vary things up, and it's really remarkable. I've tried this in the summer since. It does make it in the end. One, time flies by when you're in it because there's all these new places you're going, even if they're minor places that that you go. But also, then when you look back, it feels like the summer lasted a very long time. So I'll always look forward to varying things in the summer just to get that effect because different places will increase how much memory then you have for those events.
Because there's this thing with memory, and I think we talked about it in our previous podcast on memory, that if you read a book in different rooms of your house, for example, that improves your memory of
Yep,
it because your brain is just naturally going to associate different parts of the book with different things in that room. So you're giving your brain kind of more buckets to put things in if you go to different
exactly.
locations.
Yeah,
So
and that's so like a huge the biggest part of our brain dedicated to one thing is our visual cortex. So anything that ties into images is extremely important for the brain and easy for it to do. And the second biggest is the spatial part. So and then how you navigate in the spatial part. So we have another large part of our brain is about how to move through space. And the when you look at Thomas Aquinas's, in the Summa Theologica, he talks about how to improve memory. The first thing is form new images, and in your mind. So whenever you learn something new, you make a new image that you associate with it, something that you haven't reused before. And then the second thing is places, to think of it in terms of places. So which also is very very interesting. His the other two he mentions are the role of fear or anxiety in helping us to remember things better, and then finally the role of repetition. Uh, Interesting that the four things he mentions are all very well attested to in modern neuroscience. as the main ways that you can actually build your memory. So it's fascinating. He had, of course, the Middle Ages, they had figured out memory and how to use it.
Yeah. So, okay, Kevin, earlier you gave us this threefold division of to improve memory. So you have um, being open to the new thing, like being mindful in the moment, that it becomes more deeply impressed upon your mind. And then you have the storage, and then you have the retrieval. So I think when it comes to the first one, that's a very big topic that we've covered in a lot of episodes before about mindfulness and before you sit down to work, the value of doing a practice of mindfulness to really settle your mind and be in the present moment. So I don't know if you have anything more to add on that, but I think it would be super helpful if we could walk through the other two in greater detail, just to help people with this process.
Sure. I think the most interesting thing is, I don't really, apart from it's hard to make good memories and to attend to the present moment if you're rushed. So you'll tend to remember things best if you can slightly unpack the time around it. So you're not sitting down rushing to learn and rushing to leave. So but that you have a feeling like, okay, I'm able now to clear my mind out of any clutter that's there and then give my entire attention to this one thing. So any book you read in the summer, you can treat it as a kind of mindfulness practice that before you start reading it, just let your mind clear, let your mind come to silence. Because that way you won't get pulled off by after having sat down for 30 seconds, like, oh, I have to do this, or I have to send that email, or I have to buy this thing. So you just but you learn to get all those things out of your mind first. And then you can meditatively, this in a sense, read the what you're going to read so that you give your whole attention. But the more interesting practice is on the storage front. So one of these things where modern science says that is fascinating and new is the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that we use to store memories. Doesn't simply do memory storage, but it also does novel image creation in the mind. So if you actually turn on, you could say, the hippocampus more intensely by, as you're learning something, coming up with some novel image that goes with it. And the way that the memory experts teach people to start practicing this is there's different ways you could do it, but one way is for if you're say you're reading something that is 15 pages. The idea is for each page, just before you start reading, you form a new novel image in your mind. So something that the example Matthias Rubing uses is, let's say you're reading an economics paper and you want to be able to remember it later. Well, you say, okay, then you just choose something like money or coins. Okay, so you have a dollar bill in your mind. Okay, and you see it, and then you read the page. But you kind of let the dollar bill be there. You know, maybe it's even better if it's something there's some unusual feature in the dollar bill. And then the next page you change it up again. You maybe make it a $2 bill. That's a little bit strange. Or a $3 bill, which doesn't exist. So okay, so you can play with it, or it could be made out of marble, or it could be made out of chocolate, or it could be made out of cheese, or it's a piggy bank on one page, and then it's a living piggy bank, and you keep coming up with just new images that are they don't have to be that associated with what you're reading at all. And then he says, when you don't think of it the entire time you're reading, you just call it to mind briefly at the beginning and end of the page. So, with that in mind, then, he said, right when you finish it, try to just flow through the images in your mind. And you go to each page, just look at it long enough for the image to come back. And then go to the next one. You do a quick review. And he says that will set it in your mind. That's one interesting way of trying to it's actually there is activating your hippocampus, and just having to come up with an image and to imagine it when it's not present already activates it, but then making it to some novel image makes it even more powerful. And then with that, you're actually able to much better recall all the details because the image in some way acts like a magnet for all the information on the page. And with just a little bit of practice, you get surprised by how much you can remember of everything on the page just with the being able to recall the image.
Yeah, it seems like a powerful strategy. So, quick question about it: do you have to? or I mean, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but is it necessary to do it? Would it be helpful to do it for like a novel, or are we more talking about stuff with abstract information skill, like
Mhm. With the
technical reading?
novel, you have a benefit, which is if the writer is describing anything, you try to really clearly imagine that as you're
Hmm.
reading.
So you don't need
But
it.
yeah, so you don't need it as much, particularly though if it's what is called a memory-friendly image. So a memory-friendly image, which is one like your hippocampus loves, we could say, is one it's like about 2 feet in front of you, and it's about 2 feet by 2 feet, by 2 feet. It's 3D. It's it's about as big as your arms are, put apart like they're holding a box. And so you imagine it large, three-dimensional, in color, with detail. With that, it doesn't take much. So if you were to say, think of an elephant. Okay, what does people might think, well, I'm not good at forming images. Probably you are. If you could say, is the snout up or down? That might be enough. Is it facing left or right? Is it head on or side view? There's all these ways, in fact, that are there, and people are doing a kind of a visualization. Uh, you can also use this in novels to remember names, and this works in real life too. So you try to come up with a name, so that somehow, so say you come across the name Jacob, and so you might think of a ladder or a well or something that you associate with the name Jacob, or I don't know, you could choose. You take anything from the name. It could even just be a sounds like. So
Hmm.
Matthias Ribbing
Sounds like
says
rake, Jake and rake. That's
exactly.
what I think
So you
of.
think of a rake.
Yeah.
Yep. And you want to go generally with whatever first comes to mind, because
Hmm.
that's the one, for whatever reason, has more connections in your head. And so it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be there. So, and if it kind of sounds like, so if it's Emily, then you might think of a mill or something. It, is another example he gives. So just try to use an image. In real life, it's best to associate the image with the person's face. We do have an incredible capacity to remember faces, but you unlock it if you focus on one unique aspect of the face. So I don't know, it could be, the person's beard, but that could change. So you have to be careful. Next time you see them, they don't have the beard, and then you have a hard time. But you just pick one thing in their face, and then you, in a sense, you play with it. You zoom it so it's like a landscape. And then the object that's their name is placed there. And you see that together. You can do this while watching a video. So if you're watching television or a movie, and then you see, okay, you have someone's name. Sometimes you just want to watch things and enjoy it, and that's fine. But you can also use it to develop memory, and then you just try to like get used to noticing people's faces with a particular characteristic. Just pay more attention to it, and gradually gets easier to pick out a characteristic that you would like to use. And you can take their name. So then it's Bill, and so you think of a dollar bill, and okay, there's a dollar bill now sitting on the mole he has, which is like a mountain. Okay, and that's like now how you associate those things together.
So, okay, I tried this the other day, and I found that okay, I was just meeting someone for the first time, and then I couldn't think of something. So I started getting
Mhm.
frustrating, and then they were talking and I was getting frustrated. So
Yeah,
I imagine this is something I'll get a little bit better at with time. It'll just become quicker. And so I don't know. Do you have
yeah.
any words of advice to just encourage me to keep me going in this practice?
Yeah, that's why practicing with television is so much easier.
Hmm.
And or just when you're reading the newspaper or you're reading any kind of book, when you come across a name, try to imagine it somehow. So you get used to then forming images quickly. So this new image formation, which is meant to be activating your hippocampus,
Hmm.
takes practice. But you can practice on your own. It's never easy. So if you're going to be going to a party, there's going to be 50 new people there, and you don't know, 49 of them. That is not going to be the place where you're going to find it easy to practice this. So
Yeah.
that's like, you need like the fourth grade version, not the college senior version of what practice looks like. So and then you gradually just keep building it up. So I think that the more you can practice it in easy, safe places where you have more time, then gradually it gets quicker and quicker and quicker.
Hmm. There are
But
also
there is
all
something
these,
physical you're doing. Just coming up with a new image is a physical event in the brain, and it's activating the part that will do the storage and retrieval.
yeah. I was going to say there are also all these exercises that Matthias Ribbing gives for just training your ability to produce new images, like uh, imagining something in front of you, like you said,
Yep.
large 3D color, and then rotating it, and be like he has an exercise to imagine a cat, and then the first thing the cat starts doing in your mind is just starts moving, and so you want to
It's
make sure,
funny when you
okay,
first imagine the
stops
cat, it
moving.
walks
Yeah.
on its own.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it's hard to get it to
Yeah.
stay still. So even a cat in your mind, it's hard to get it to do what you want.
Yeah.
And then rotate it, and then have it move very slowly, and then imagine it with a ball of string, and then imagine in different positions and so forth. And I
Yeah.
think there's another one of imagine as many variations of like a car, I think it is, as you can. So just
Yeah.
try to vividly imagine as so there are these exercises you can do to just kind of train this muscle, strengthen this muscle.
Yeah. So if you practice them, he says 2 minutes a day. Even within a week, you notice the images are much quicker and more vivid. So, and it'd be fascinating to study this, with our fMRI and other devices to be able to see what is really being activated by this. But it seems like it's the right part of the hippocampus. So any kind of image formation, and if you make it fantastic. So if you're imagining a cat with a ball of yarn, you could make the ball of yarn gigantic and the cat is tiny on it. Or you could have the cat inside the ball of yarn getting its way out of it. So you can play with images and come up with more novel ones. Just by changing around size, you're able to do that. One thing that's a fascinating experiment, which does the same kinds of stuff, is if you have a strong emotion, try to turn that emotion into a new image that you see right in front of you or about that right size. You don't have to close your eyes. Just let your eyes see it with your eyes open. All this imaging work you should do with your eyes open. That because like when you're at a party and someone says their name, you don't have to like, close your eyes to think of the image. So it's always good to be practicing all of this with the eyes open, and it's not that hard. So then you can even with the emotion, you let your the emotion become an object, and then you analyze it in all this detail, and you let yourself form all this richness about it. How heavy is it? If it's if it's a ball, what is it? Is it hollow? Is it solid? How much does it weigh? What's the temperature? Does it conduct electricity? Does it rotate? Does it do anything? So you learn to like play with it. And then interesting the fun interesting practice is then you think of your internal reaction to this object, like to the original one, and there'll be something opposite, something different that comes out. So, and then you look at that and you describe that in full detail. And then you go back to the original object and it will have changed. And you go back then to your response object and it will have changed. And you go back and forth. We might need to go through this. We can do this at greater length in another episode. But that kind of exercise lets you exercise curiosity about the emotion, but it also lets you form new active images in your mind. I think that helps people. It helps people to experience one that these emotions aren't just permanent things, but once you let your mind get around it, think of a challenge you're facing. Whatever that challenge is, now what kind of object would come to mind? Like what kind of object would it be? You will come up with creative new ways of approaching the challenge if you let your brain do these creative things with it. So it's a fun thing to experiment with, and it still gets your image forming power exercised.
Now, okay, Kevin, last question. So we often recommend that people form an image in their mind of them working at their best, or this is like reframing. Form an image in your mind of you uh, loving and serving through this work. So is what does that mean? Because we actually get this question a fair amount. What does that mean? And is it doing the same thing?
Yes. So I think that what we're trying to do is unlock a new kind of creativity in people. So if you can imagine this work that you're about to do transformed into real love and service, you will start to think of new qualities that go in that work. Now, this is using a part of your brain that doesn't have language. So you might not be able to put into words what it is you're seeing when you do that. But so it might be some kind of general feeling that you have. It could be, it could seem like an attitude or a mindset that you can't really put into words. And that would be a sweet spot of growth. So, yes, I think that sometimes people with a vivid imagination can see flashes like a photograph, like or like a little brief video. There's a few seconds of this flash, a flash of this, and a flash of this. That's great too. You could also think of someone you admire most doing this task in your place to form a clear image of that person doing it. So being able to see your role models, being able to to watch them as if in a movie, even doing things in your own life, that also unlocks this new kind of creativity, but it's doing the image work as well. So your entire right hemisphere doesn't really have language. So, it can use some aspects of language. It can understand to some extent, but the real language part of the brain is generally for most people in the left brain. But it does have insight and it does have contact with reality. And it has an openness, in fact, to ideals and with bonds. And it does it all non-verbally. And that's what you're trying to tap into, because that's really how you then innovate in your work and come up with fresh new goals that you can be setting for yourself, which is ultimately what we're after. The other thing I like about it is it's not a goal in the work. So it's not that the good you're doing is thereby improved. It's a good really in you. And I think when we do something that improves ourself, that's like a kind of everlasting growth. That's very different than just doing a better job painting the fence more neatly with fewer drops. That's great. But if you grew in attentiveness or care for details, or love by learning how to put love into something even like painting a fence for someone else, that actually stays with you and it has become a part of you. So I think of that as some everlasting form of growth. And that's why if you imagine yourself doing this task in a new way, turning it into love and service, it makes it that much better.
Awesome, Kevin. I think that's a very powerful note for us to end on.
Great. And I'll also say if people in the summertime, they can maybe go back to previous podcasts we've done to see, whether there's from each podcast, you can derive something to practice, and we'll, and to see. I think the summer can be a unique time of growth. It's just going to be different than typically happens during the school year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Awesome, Kevin. Well, thank you so much.
All right, Sharif, thanks to
So
you.
we'll be back. I was going to say we'll be back next week, but I guess we'll be back in a couple months.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
See you
See
then.
you then.